Ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for your time, but I feel obliged to start by saying that this will not be a nice video. I'm always happy to answer questions and give help to creationists. After all, ignorance is not a crime, and if I can do my part to help educate, I'm always more than willing. That being said, I draw a line at blatant dishonesty, repetitive lying, and willful ignorance. My attitude in this video isn't directed at all creationists, merely those who have been caught lying repeatedly, such as Nephilmfree. This is a video response to one made by Nephilmfree regarding Italian wall lizards. In his video, Nephilmfree raises a legitimate question that I'll be happy to address here. Now, unfortunately though, the remainder of his video pretty much demonstrates the black hole of stupidity and dishonesty that's come to characterize creationism itself, and for that I'll be happy to provide some public flogging. So his video was in response to one that I did about the Italian wall lizard. The short of the story is that 30 years ago some lizards were let loose on an island off the coast of Croatia. On that island, their diet was rapidly changed from being based primarily on insects to, now, plant matter. When they were re-examined in the present day, it was discovered that the descendants were markedly different from their ancestors. For one, their skull and jaw measurements and densities had become much more robust, their muscles of mastication were more pronounced, and interestingly, they developed a brand new structure, cecal valves to aid in the digestion of plant matter. So all of these adaptive changes wonderfully demonstrate evolution in action, as they've helped the lizards adapt to their new environment and diet. Now, on to Nephilmfree.
You see, the reason the parent population did not have the cecal valves is because they stopped expressing the genes which produce cecal valves. When they were loosed upon the island, a change to their diet occurred. They adapted by beginning to re-express those genes which create the cecal valves.
As you can see, Nephilm, who, by the way, bears an uncanny resemblance to the BTK killer, has claimed that these genes were there all along, dormant, and simply became reactivated. Now this is a legitimate claim. How do we know that this is not the case? Well, there are several reasons. Firstly, Podarcus sicula has many subspecies in it. If the gene was latently present, we would expect all of the individuals to have it and express it in different circumstances, but the fact of the matter is that this clearly isn't the case. See, the members of P. sicula released on Podmakaru are the only ones who demonstrate this trait. One can take a step back as well and take a look at other lizards just even in the same genus. Again, despite eating a diet rich in plant life, they haven't developed these cecal valves. Any of them. And this strongly goes against your claim because, again, if the gene is present and they're placed in a diet that's heavily made up of plant matter, we would expect some of the cousins and some of the subspecies to be expressing it, but it's not. Alright, the second reason that you're wrong is that mutations accumulate at a steady rate. So if a gene isn't being used, it's rapidly mutated into nothingness because natural selection has nothing to act on. See, when a gene is expressed, if a negative mutation happens in that gene, natural selection will knock it out and preserve the original. But in this case, if the gene is not being expressed, it would be mutated to nothingness because there's no force to stop that eventual decline and accumulation of mutations. Now, as a response to this, you could say that the gene only recently got knocked out, but that too is blatantly incorrect because if that were the case, the presence of cecal valves would now be widespread from the ancestral population which had it. So no matter how you look at it, your assessment's incorrect. That is how we know the gene was not latently present. But all of this aside, I'd love to point out your hypocrisy real quick on this issue. So you have no problem crying it was latent, despite the overwhelming reasoning against it, but when it comes to issues such as atavisms, you go silent. Please, once again, tell me, why do whales and dolphins have the genes for making legs, but sharks and fish don't? Why do chickens have the genes for making teeth? More importantly, why do you dishonestly ignore this phenomenon when it's stacked against you, yet it's the first thing you attempt to latch onto in your pathetic attempt at a rebuttal?
You see, every structure in an organism is coded in that organism's DNA. If the code for that feature is not present in the DNA of the organism, it can never appear in the organism. You see, DNA is the recipe for the design and function of every feature and biochemical process that occurs in an organism. So, if it's not in the DNA, it can't arise. Now, here's where you fell on your face, Don, because you believed that this cecal valves developed without genetic information. That if a feature is not coded in the DNA of an organism, it cannot appear in the organism. You see, the information to create the feature must be in the DNA before it can be expressed.
Look, man, I don't know if you're honestly this stupid or if you're just possessed by a retarded ghost or something, but you really don't have any clue about how biology works. Mutations happen in the DNA. Thus, an organism which did not have the trait has a mutation, develops with the new mutated DNA encoding the trait, and then is able to pass it on. No one's suggesting that this change wasn't in the organism's DNA. If it wasn't, how could it be passed on? This is your problem. You combine absolute ignorance, absolute certainty, and absolute dishonesty, and you get a creationist. You don't understand anything about evolution, are certain that you're right, and will lie incessantly when the facts don't support your position, and unfortunately, they never do.
And appear in the organism. Bear in mind also, there is not one instance known to mankind whereby new information has ever entered the genome of any creature.
And once again, you sit here and repeatedly lie to people as if they were kids you're trying to snatch up into your van. The problem is that this has been explained to you time and time again, how new information is added. It's not a point of debate, it's a well-known fact. First, gene duplication occurs. This allows mutations to accumulate in the extra copy of the DNA without any problems, because remember, the cell still has the original, which is working fine. Rarely, the second copy has a mutation that just happens to have a function, and bam, you have new information. Wonderful example, nylonase, the enzyme made by bacteria that breaks down nylon. Now, there was a gene duplication event followed by what's called a frameshift mutation, and you can learn more about that on my How Evolution Works, I believe it's part 4, Mutations in DNA video. So this duplicated gene had a frameshift mutation. Now this mutation, the single one, changed every single amino acid in the gene and just happened to code for something which was functional. New information observed, it's in any basic biology textbook, and the longer you continue to repeat things you know to be false, the more people you'll drive away from your religion.
Now pay close attention. Now, you might want to go full screen with your browser with this video so you can see exactly what it is I'm posting here. There are many sources, Don, which provide the information that discredits your ridiculous claim. This is an article on Science Daily, a very popular science website, which describes the event you're referring to regarding the sequel valves of Italian wall lizards. Let's take a look at something they state here. Don, the article states, tail clips taken for DNA analysis confirm that the Podmakaru lizards were genetically identical to the source population on Pod Copisti. Genetically identical.
By genetically identical, the authors mean that they're from the same species, the same ancestral population. They have the same genetic markers. Do you honestly believe that the article means that the island is full of some clone army of identical twin lizards running all over the place? If you were honestly any slower, we'd have to water you twice a day. That your ignorance of biology shows. This can't be stressed enough. Independent assortment? Crossing over, perhaps? If you knew the basics of biology that are taught to everybody in 8th grade, you'd realize that it's impossible to have 40 years of genetically identical lizards due to phenomenons like independent assortment and crossing over.
In fact, the gene which creates the sequel valves has been found in the parent population and sequenced. The gene is present.
And with that, game over. You just blatantly lied, no questions asked. The gene has not been sequenced. After doing a search through the literature and asking the scientists responsible for the find, I can successfully conclude that you're full of shit. You literally just made this up, and that unambiguously makes you a liar. So please, remember that next time that you preach about evil scientists and how wonderful Christians are. Ironically, he's your God, his rules, you can go to hell. So Nephilim, thanks a lot for all of your help. In one 10-minute video of yours, you've demonstrated the problem with creationism nicely. You're absolutely ignorant about science and willing to lie without remorse or regard to make your case. Ironically, I asked you for your source on this months ago, and I wonder why you didn't respond. So, Nephilim, show me on the doll where you pull your arguments out of.